Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Your Next Business Bestie. My name is Jen Waybor Hart, and I'm your host. This podcast is all about introducing you to people in my circle that have incredible businesses, but incredible stories. And I am super excited to welcome my friend Lindsay to the show this week. Hi, Lindsay.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
So, Lindsay and I met just over a year ago. And so technically we met through a networking group here in town, but I really feel like we really met through Balanced. So Balanced is a local yoga studio. Well, I mean it's more than just yoga now, Pilates and bar and all the things. So we met when Balanced was opening, which was 13 months ago. It's funny because I feel like I've known you longer than that, but and we
True.
met when
That's
we were
going
doing
fast.
it's got right. Yeah, I feel like I've said this a few times on the podcast, but everything since 2020 is such a blur. Like I can't figure out what year things happened. And yeah. And the friendships I've made in that time, like you and Megs and Crystal, I feel like I've known you all so much longer than I have. But Lindsay, why don't you tell the audience what it is that you do?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's pretty simple. I manage short-term rentals. So you think Airbnb, VRBOs. I own one of my own, and then I manage for other people as well.
Well, how on earth did you get into doing this?
Super, super randomly. I had a property that my dad and I fixed up, and my kids and I lived in it for 2 years. And then as I was growing out of it, I was like, what am I going to do with this property? Super randomly, some people that I had known in my past came in and said that they were doing Airbnb and they needed someone to help clean their properties. And I was like, oh, well, that might be something I could do to make some extra cash. So I started doing that. And then that same time thinking about, I've got to move out of my little house and get into a bigger house. And so it all kind of just snowballed from there. I decided instead of renting out my little house, I would do short term rental and see how it went. And if it went well, then great. If it didn't, then I would just go to long term rental. Ended up going so well that then my dad told people and I started managing their properties. And then town manager in town told other people, like, hey, there's this lady that manages. And before you know, it was just like the snowball effect of me starting to meet new people, managing their properties, and just one person talking to another, talking to another. And then my business just kind of started from there. So it was totally just, I don't know, random and never anything I thought, I'm going to be a short term project property manager when I grow up. That was just, it just kind of happened.
It's so funny that you say that because I think almost everyone that I've interviewed on the podcast, with the exception of the two photographers, it's but we're all in the same boat. Like same with me. I was never like, oh, I'm going to be a creative strategist when I grow up. No, I said I was going to be a lawyer or and an author, and I still want to be a published author, and we're going to get to that. But know what? Like some of the coolest entrepreneurs I know, none of us had this plan to be where we are. I don't think, especially, our generation, it wasn't, go start your own business. It was go to college and start a career. And so many of us are like, no, screw that. And we kind of landed in these businesses, but it's so unique and it's a great road to be on. How long ago did you start your business? When did this all begin?
Yeah, that was 2019 when we moved from my smaller house into my bigger house. And yeah, it was May of 2019. So this May was 5 years. So it's been, yeah, and it's been such a blessing. Like you mentioned 2020. And I think that's really when my business, I was lucky to start and slowly. And then it just like took off from there once 2020 hit. 2020 and 2021 really like catapulted my business really, since hotels were closed, and then weddings were allowed to happen again, and it just kind of catapulted my business, and now we're kind of back into like normal world, not quite as crazy busy, but I was thankful for that because it really helped me grow, and learn some things that now I can take in, and with that growth, um, kind of see where the future is going to go.
Yeah, absolutely. 2020 is such a weird year to talk about because obviously it was, the shutdown and, there was so much bad, but there was like a silver lining, I guess. There were some good things too. I mean, I started my business 6 months before you started yours practically. I started it in October of 2018. And 2020 and 2021 were when I got my feet really on the ground and decided what I wanted to do with my business. And people weren't meeting in person, so their online presence was that much more important. So, same thing. That's when I got crazy busy, made a lot of mistakes, learned from them, and now it's like this rhythm. Once you get into that year 5, it's a very different world in self-employment. But tell the audience what it's like to work with you. Either from let's do from the homeowner side, so the property owner side. What could they expect?
Sure. I mean, we'll talk kind of about a lot of my owners live out of state, like it's a second home for them potentially. So, although I do have some that are in town too. So it kind of depends. I'm one of those people like I'll just do whatever you want. So I'm very flexible. I'm super easy to work with. My motto has been from the beginning is like I don't want to work with anybody that doesn't want to work with me. So if we end up working together and it's not a good fit or it's not working out or we need to adjust things, like I'm super easy in that way, as I just want it to work for everybody. So if you want to be really hands-on and be a part of your property and get a phone call every time there's an issue, or you want to be the homeowner that fixes everything that breaks, I'm totally down with that. Or if you want to be the homeowner that's like, nope, I want to be completely hands off. It's all on you. You take care of everything. Just send me this check at the end of the month. I'm down for, and then anybody in between. So I'm super like really flexible. I mean, I you kind of have to be in this industry. There's just like things are going to get. I mean, I had a bull in a property yesterday as well as a salamander. I've yet to have bulls and salamanders. I always say I'm never surprised because it's always something new. So I'm super, super just like easy to work with. I think I'm really easy. I'm easy to communicate with. I want to work through just about anything that and make it a good fit for all of us. So I'm really like down with whatever hands-on they want to be. And then I'm just really good at communicating. Every month I send an email kind of explaining like, hey, here's what happened with your property. Here's maybe what we needed to do. Here's some maintenance things we need to take care of, those kind of things. But for the most part, it's just easy. I try to
Yeah.
be chill and easy and flexible, I guess.
Yeah, a couple of things. So, first, I had my first retreat that I ever ran on my own last year, and we had an Airbnb in Larkspur, and there was a giant salamander on the stairs when we got there. So that's really funny that you say that because they did not have like a property manager at all. So the owners came down, and I didn't care. Like I don't care. I just didn't want him to be stepped on because he was on the
Yeah.
stairs. But that's so funny that you mentioned a salamander, but also the flexibility piece. It's our businesses are obviously vastly different, but I think that that's a unique way to do things, and that's how I do them too. I've tried over the years to have structured, pick from a plan that I have on my website. And that doesn't work. And for me, it was like some small businesses are all different and everybody has different needs and wants. And same thing, they also vary in how much control they want to have. I have the clients that are like, Jen, just do all the things. Just come up with the strategy, execute it, tell me how much I owe you. And then I have the clients that are like, I want to approve everything. And then the step below that is like, I want to write things and just have you edit them. So same boat there. It's like, homeowners, it's their property, it's their investment too. So I'm sure you get a vast array of the people that want to be involved in everything versus the people that are just Lindsay, do your thing. Do you
Yeah.
find as they work with you longer that they end up being a little bit more hands off?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Everybody starts out at the beginning freaked out about every little detail and like, oh my gosh, is the house getting taken care of? But as the years progress and they get to know me and realize like, okay, she knows what she's doing. She's got this down. Yeah. I mean, I can go now months without hearing from certain owners. Whereas when I first worked with them, it was like all day long. I just text. So, and I'm used to that. I'm also like extremely patient person. And I think that really helps is just like I'm pretty patient in that regard. Whereas like it's just, yeah, it's no big deal for me. I answer the same questions over and over and over again. And that's okay.
And then you work with consumers as well, right? Like someone like me, we've talked about this. If I do the Kismet retreat again, I could come to you if I was looking for a property, and if one of your properties is a fit, that's an option too.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, now that I've been doing this for so long, and we have such a tight knit community, and I know so
Wow.
many people, it's such a blessing because I always say like this small town's a blessing and a curse, right? Because sometimes it's like I can't just hide. Sometimes you just want to go to the way and not see anybody. Can never do that. But it's also such a blessing because I mean, I almost daily get phone calls of like, oh, my cousin's coming to town, or I work with a lot of realtors where you know, their clients might have a month or two when they're between properties, or a friend's family comes to visit. Like if your family came from Maine and needed a place to stay, like I know you'd call me first, right? Like I have those kind of connections like all across the board. So I try to work when I work with family friends and stuff like that. We usually can work out a pretty cool deal. And then of course through Airbnb and VRBO, that's mostly just through the phone, you know, or through my
Yeah.
computer. But yeah, I mean, at this point been doing it for so long. It's like everybody, I'm known as Airbnb Lindsay. So everyone just calls and they're like, oh yeah, I know a girl. So
That's awesome.
yeah, it's been fun that way because I've gotten to help like so many friends and family and friends of friends um, along the years find a place to stay, weddings and, you know, different family. Yeah. And lots of retreats, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's been fun.
What keeps you going? I mean, you must occasionally come across the nightmares because it happens to all of us, right? No matter where you're at in your business, you're gonna come across the nightmares. So, what keeps you going when shit gets hard? What keeps you wanting to do what you do?
Yeah. Well, I used to be a super people pleaser. So if it wasn't perfect and they had any negative anything, I used to just like crush me. So this business has like given me a lot thicker skin, which is nice, where I realized like I'm literally not going to please everybody. I give the very best service I absolutely can. And then, you know, I just hope for the best. And 99.9% of the time, like people are amazing and are so thankful and so grateful. And I think that's part of it is just as a people pleaser, getting those 5-star reviews. Like every time I open my email and it's a 5-star review, it's I almost have 1,000 of them, and it still
That's
makes me
amazing.
happy. 1,000, almost 1,000 later, like I still get that little like bit of high, being like, it was great for them. They had the best family vacation ever. It makes me happy. But I think the best part about running my own business is just like the freedom that it allows me to have. Like I am a solo parent, and so there's no backup parent, there's no help, there's nobody getting my kids to and from their sporting events. Like it's all on me. And I think having a 9 to 5 job just would never work for my family. And so having that freedom and the flexibility for literally being able to work from my phone anywhere. I mean, I'm on spring break in Mexico and I'm making money, right? So
Yeah.
I make money from anywhere, anytime, all the time. So it's really flexible. There's no clocking in or clocking out, which has its pros and cons. You know, I was
Yes.
blowing up mattresses at 10 o'clock last a couple nights ago. You know, so there are days when it's not always desirable, but the most of the time, it's like just so worth it, just to have that flexibility and that freedom.
It's funny. There's a quote that's something like entrepreneurs will work 80 hours a week for themselves to avoid working 40 hours a week for someone else. And it's so true. Like, and I think every once in a while, I'm like, man, it might be nice to have a 9 to 5 that I could just leave at the door. And I have never, I mean, for a short term time, I worked for a publishing company. I designed textbook covers, and that was the only job I've ever had that I could leave at the door. And I only survived there like 4 or 5 months. The pay was atrocious, but I was like, I don't want my life to be run by a time clock. And so every once in a while, I'm like, man, but it'd be so nice to just leave work at work. But no, at the same time, like, there's a lot of freedom. I was in Mexico last week for my honeymoon, and my clients are amazing. Most of them were like, I do not want to hear from you while you're in Mexico. But I had one little emergency come up and I could handle it from the beach in Mexico, and it was no big deal. It's, yeah, the freedom and flexibility, which it sounds so cliche, but it's truly it. I mean, same thing. My husband works blue collar, but during the week, I'm solo parenting. Like I have no idea when he's going to be home. He's working overnights half the time. Like, and I can't imagine if I worked a 9 to 5 having like my daughter got in trouble at the Y last week and I had to go get her. I couldn't have done like I don't know what I would have done if I worked a 9 to 5. So it's definitely a blessing. Is most of your business referrals? I mean, we've talked about people referring you on the client on both sides, but where's the business coming from?
I mean, I'm so thankful for Airbnb. Like the guy that started Airbnb, like forever ago now, like he was just renting his apartment out in New York City, I think, of as like a bedroom. Because really like 90% of my business is from Airbnb. I shouldn't say 90, like 70% probably Airbnb, and then you've got like some part is VRBO, and then I've got my referral business too. So, but a lot of it is, Airbnb just kind of does all the marketing for you, which is really, I
Yeah.
mean, it's like so genius. It's so awesome. I really am, and I like strictly only travel Airbnb. I am loyal to a fault to
I wish I'd
Airbnb.
been loyal to a fault last week. My husband and my resort in Mexico was a huge disappointment, and we're sitting there, we're like, oh, we should have just done an Airbnb. Like it's the Airbnb. The whole entire idea of Airbnb is just amazing. Like just the simple act of having a kitchen where you go and be able to cook a meal instead of having to eat out, like, and just experience actually living somewhere instead of a hotel where it's you're not really, especially here, like Palmer Lake Monument, like this is a beautiful place to be. And I imagine also you get to be part of people's big days. Like I imagine if I had had a bunch of people travel in for the wedding, like you get, it's part of something so exciting in their life, which sounds like so much fun.
Yeah, yeah, and I just love like I love where we live, and I think it's such a beautiful place. And so when people are like, "Palmer Lake's so special," I'm like, "Isn't it?" Like you'd never
Yeah.
even, people aren't like, "Oh, I'm gonna go to Palmer Lake," but they put in Colorado Springs, and then the little small towns around Colorado Springs come up, and that's usually unless they're going to a wedding in our small town, but it's fun to share our little slice of heaven with out of towners, especially big people who are from big cities, and then they come and have that small city feel. It's really special. So it is. I never get tired of people telling me, how special they think it is.
Yeah, and for those that don't live local or maybe don't know, so we are in the Tri-Lakes area. We're just north of Colorado Springs and about an hour south of Denver. But as I'm from Maine, and it reminds me so much of the small towns in Maine, except for we can get into the Springs or get into Denver so easily. I live in the more congested side of Monument, if you could call it that. I mean, we do have a Whataburger and a KFC across the street now. Versus Palmer Lake is very much still very, very small town. But it's like, we have a parade on the 4th of July. And like, it's just, like you said, you go to the grocery store, you're going to see somebody you know. So we're very lucky that we have the big city resources. We can get to the concerts in Denver or the Springs or whatever, the sporting events, but we get this little quieter part of the community here. And I remember my retreat was in Larkspur, and it was just people were amazed that we were so close to Colorado Springs, but it felt like we were in the middle of nowhere. Um, but let's shift gears a little. I would we can't talk without me bringing up where I think you and I really bonded. And some of my listeners might know, but my daughter's biological mom passed away in 2022. I forgot what year it was for a second. And Lindsay, the father of her children passed away. I don't know how many years ago now. But it's been a long time, hasn't
Yeah, almost 8 years. So he passed
it?
away in
8 years.
2000. Yeah.
So I remember, and it meant so much to me the day you came to me and shared that with me, because this journey of raising a child, children who have lost a parent is very unique. For me, especially being the stepmom, we don't use that term in our house. Lindsay and Elena likes to say that I wasn't her baby, or she wasn't my baby, but now she's my daughter. And I think that's like
Fresh.
perfect. But Lindsay, you've continued to be such a resource for me in figuring out how to manage the emotions and the memories and all of that. So would you share a little bit about your story when it comes to your kiddos?
Yeah, yeah. well, they're 10 and 12 now, but their dad passed away in 2016 when my daughter was 2.5 and my son was 5, in a super tragic way. He took his own life. He suffered from PTSD, from serving in the military. And it obviously shifted my entire blueprint overnight. And my kids and I well, all of us were living in Montana, and then moved back to Colorado just pretty much immediately to be near family. And yeah, it's completely, changed the trajectory of my life. And at the time, of course, I thought my life was over and I had no idea what I was going to do. And at the time I was a stay-at-home mom and had been for almost 5 years. And but as with anything in life, you just keep getting up every morning and keep showing up and doing your best. And before you know it, it's been 8 years and you're just raising the two best kids on planet Earth. And, so, in a lot of ways, can't imagine it any other way. So I literally, I can't, like we were talking about earlier, I literally can't believe it's been 8 years. Like sometimes it feels like a whole nother lifetime ago. Because I just feel like a completely different person than I was when it happened. But also sometimes I feel like it didn't even happen. And this is just how it always has been. Like we've just always just been the three of us. I don't know. Time is weird like that. But yeah, it's been, a lot of people have come in and out of my life, through tragedy, I guess. And it's been, I don't want to say a blessing because that's not exactly the word, but I guess more of just it is a blessing to know that there are other people that have gone through something that you're working through or you're going through, and knowing that my story might be able to help you. And someday down the line, your story is going to be able to help someone else. And it's like catapults. It's just this like constant, never ending, evolving story of love and help, and all of us just doing our best and trying our best and helping each other along the way, I guess.
I love that you put that it's an ever evolving, like it's about love, because it would be so simple for us to say it's ever evolving about tragedy, because that would be the easy way to look at your story and Elena, my daughter's story, which has become part of my story, is the loss and the tragedy. But I think that's, my podcast, my business, my everything is all about that the authentic sharing of stories has the power to save lives. And I believe that wholeheartedly. And in the same way as like what you went through and what you and your kids continue to go through, because it's a forever thing. You're such a blessing and a resource for me. I mean, it was things like when my daughter's mom's birthday came up, I remember I texted you and I was like, we're just not sure how to handle this, or like the anniversary of her passing and deciding how much we protected her from outside sources reminding her of that day. And you've just been such an amazing resource. And I'm so thankful because your kids are beautiful. Your relationship with your kiddos is just beautiful. And for me, mine was my story of my depression. And I've shared this a little bit before, but when I survived 2018, which is when I started my business, I did not share about my depression or any of it when I was going through it. But afterwards, I started to share about my own struggles and those thoughts of taking my own life. And a friend reached out and she had written a goodbye note to her family. And then when she read my story, she tore up that letter to her family. And that was like the most pivotal moment. And I don't think she even realizes how much that has impacted the entire trajectory of my life. But it woke me up to the fact that like we have to talk about this stuff. We have to share the ugly stuff, because there's beauty in it, because we're on the other side of it. I've probably said this a million times, but sharing from your scars instead of your wounds is a big thing. We say it in yoga too. Teaching from our scars, not our wounds, because you never know whose life you're going to affect and how you're going to continue that snowball of the story of love and empowerment and all of that. So the biggest thank you from my heart to yours, because you continue to be such a rock star influence for me as I navigate this for my daughter. So thank you for that so much.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We're gonna shift gears one more time. Well, at least. And it's so funny. So when Lindsay booked her time to be on the podcast with me, she sent me a text. It was either later that day or a couple days later, and she was like, I forgot I published a book. And I laughed so hard because what it's my dream to publish a book. Um, my husband texted me yesterday actually, and he was like, when are you gonna write a book?" And I was like, "Oh, in my free time." So I think it's totally badass that you have written and published a book. So tell us, what's the book about?
Honestly, it really was from a place of like after Chris passed and I was working hard with my trauma therapist and she just said, you just write, and I just started journaling a ton. And then I was working with another therapist and she just said, I think you have something here that is worth sharing. And it really was just a matter of uh really more of like a necessity to get out like everything that was inside to just like get it all out of me, I think. And then I'm a really goal oriented person. So if I make a goal, like I'm doing it. So I made this goal of, hey, I'm writing this dang book. So I did, and I made the decision and the goal. And so I took a kind of a self-publishing course on how to do it. And I followed the course like to the letter. And I sat down and I wrote 30 minutes a day for 24 days, I think it was. So my kids went to the Y. They were still really young at that time. So they went to the Y. The Y offered 2 hours of childcare at that time. I don't know if it's changed, but so I'd spend an hour writing, and then I would spend an hour of actual working out. So I wrote my book, yeah, in 24 days, I think it was 30 minutes and 24 days. So I would just busted it out. And I often forget I did it because I didn't really do anything with it, I guess, like to become a published author and not be somebody that is like a well-known name, like somebody that if you're a, already a celebrity or you are it's easy to, somebody else is gonna
Mhm.
like all the heavy getting your book out there, right? If I'm a nobody, so I would have to go and try to do talks places and all that kind of stuff. And that wasn't the space I was in my life, and do a bunch of podcast interviews all about it. And I guess for me, it was like the real goal was just to get it all out. And then
Yeah.
I prayed that whoever needed the book, it would get into their hands. So it was never about making money or like the clout of writing a book. It was just like, I don't know, I made the goal and I did it. So um I continue to pray and hope that whoever needs to read it reads it, and it gets in the right hands of all the right people that need it. And who knows what's going to happen from here. I have a friend all the time who's like, you got to write another one. Now it's so sad, but now we got to hear how everything is kind of like buttoned up. So maybe in my free time,
Right?
I'll write up a follow up of where we're at now, almost a
What
decade
is the
later.
book called?
Oh, it's called Redefining Grace.
Love
It's
it.
like tagline. I can't remember the bottom, but oh my gosh, I should probably have it with me so I could like show it to you.
I will link it in the show notes. So if anyone's interested in
Yeah,
grabbing a copy, when you're ready to write the second one, maybe we'll do 24 dates together and we'll write books
uh,
together someday.
totally.
But
I'm
I
down.
love that. I love that like the purpose was just to get it out and then whoever it lands with, it lands with. I have a client who published her first book in May and the promotions to get it in front of people is it's a lot of work. So I think that's so cool. And we will link
No,
it and I will share it. Um, I'll have to buy a copy.
yeah,
'Cause-
my kids ask all the time if I make any money from my book, and I was like, no, I spent a lot of money writing my book. I don't really think I made any money like on it, but more than anything, it was just, I mean, it's something cool. I guess I can tell people, right? I wrote a book. It. So
I think that's so cool. And that's a big deal. Um, all right. So what else do we need to know about Lindsay? We haven't even touched on Pilates. Are you teaching Pilates right now?
I teach at Balance Studio once a week. Again, it was a goal of mine, right? I just said, I'm going to do
Love
this
it.
goal of it. And I was like, I'm going to be the fastest person to do the Pilates. And I think I didn't verify this, but I think I might be the fastest person that's gone through the program. But I
How long
just,
did it take?
4.5 months.
That's impressive.
So it was impressive. It was a lot of work, but I'm one of those people. I need a goal so that I have something like super solid to look for, like to go forward with, I guess. And it was just a super healthy goal that I wanted to attain. And I don't know what I'll do with it. I don't know if I
Oh,
will do anything with it, if I'll just teach one class a week. Right now, I'm satisfied with one class a week. It feels good and happy. Um, I don't know. Maybe when school goes back in, I'll do more. But for now, I'm busy with Airbnb, my two crazy kids, this fluffy dog. And it feels-
so what's the next big goal? You got Pilates done, so what's next?
Oh my gosh. Well, honestly, I'm just in love. And I think right now I'm just like totally enamored with being in love. And I'm just like, I think my goal is just to create a really healthy relationship and making sure that that's like the most solid thing I've ever done because it's forever and I want it to be forever. And I think this is the first time in my life I've made a priority of my relationship with my future spouse. So I think that's my best, like my biggest goal right now is just making sure that our relationship is really, really solid. So when we move on to the next stage of our life, like we feel just like really ready for it and like
Uh,
that it's like we're starting on the solid foot. So there's no like real like I don't know if that's necessarily a goal, but I'm just like I'm floating on clouds right now because we're
I
just
love
all
that.
happy.
No, I think that so I was in that, I got married last year. I got married very quickly last year. Most people were like, "What the hell are you doing?" But I knew, like, when my husband and I finally reconnected and started dating, I'll never forget there was a Friday night and he was like, "I have something to tell you." And I thought he was going to tell me he loved me, which he did after that. But the first thing he said was, "I'm going to change your last name." And I knew it. I knew and last year I was asked the same thing, what are your goals this year? And I was just so contently happy with the chapter that I was in. And that's a goal in itself, just like you said, like just to be present and build what you're building in your personal life. It doesn't always have to be business, but also just to simmer a little bit. Like we live in such a culture of like building and growth and all of that, that sometimes it's just nice to sit in everything we've accomplished too. Like that's just as important. All
Yeah.
right. So how can people find you if they have a property that they want you to be part of, or if they're looking for a property, what's the best way to find Lindsay?
Well, through Airbnb is always the easiest. I think Airbnb is just like the easiest platform. But they can always reach out to me, like just a phone call or text away, and I can give and I'm always down for a coffee date I love houses. They're like my favorite thing. So I love going over to people's properties and taking a look and seeing if it would be a good fit for Airbnb. And I just love talking to people about it. So, and I'm down to have a conversation anytime with anybody whenever they want. But yeah, the Airbnb is probably the easiest way to just so I can give you the link
Cool.
to my property. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll make sure that that's all in the show notes. But thank you, Lindsay. Lindsay and I are now part of a little, I hate to call it a networking group because it's not really, it's a social networking group that I started. And it's such a pleasure having you part of it. That group is just, it's blossoming into something so beautiful where we all can just check in, and I'm thoroughly enjoying getting to know you better. So thank you so much for doing this. And for those listening, if you want to find out more about me, if you're interested in what I do as a creative strategist, where I help you take your big ideas and turn them into manageable tasks, or if you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can reach out to me at jen@jensway.com or jensway.com, two N's on Jen always. But yeah, Lindsay, thank you so much. I truly appreciate you. And for everybody listening, thank you so much. And I'll see you next week on another episode of Your Next Business Bestie.